So I should be able to hear you guys now. If my audio goes out again, like, I don't know what to do. We'll try to reset it again. I thought I already fixed this issue, but that's okay. Okay, so today, like I mentioned already, like we're going to talk about like more about using Git. This is technically not like needed for the project, but I'm kind of giving you guys this ahead of time, and this is also why I'm recording it, is for like phase 2, when we start phase 2, not next week, but the week after, you might want to organize your work into kind of like a nested like repo. So like right now, I didn't really talk about how you can do this, but you probably are doing something on GitHub where you're making a new repo for each mini project you do. So like each little lab and things. And so what I'm going to show you guys is like making something like a repo that's called like phase 2, and then actually having each of those mini labs like you would normally clone it, but actually having those in those phase 2 projects, or phase 2 project, you know, like repo, and then it's a little more organized. Does that make sense to people? Cool. All right, so I'm going to show you guys how that works. So I'll tell you what, I'm just going to share my whole screen, and we'll get started on that. So let me share my screen. Okay. And you guys see, can't see you guys. All right, you guys see my screen here with the dashboard window? Yeah, I see nods. Okay, cool. So let me just open up a new terminal here, and then we'll show you a little bit. So, so the first thing you might want to do is like, okay, like we're just going to go into our GitHub real quick. And we're going to make like a new repo that we're just going to put all the phase projects in. Okay, or sorry, all the stuff for that phase, like whatever phase we're doing. And this is usually something that's like, you usually, to be honest, this is very more specific to you all because you guys are working on stuff. But it kind of helps a little bit on organize your stuff versus like literally some people will have like literally hundreds of repos because they cloned every lesson, and it just kind of clutters it up. If you've already done things for phase 1 project and you're like, oh, I have like, 20 repos for phase 1. I keep saying project, but for phase 1, don't worry about it. Like, don't stress about trying to change it up. This is just kind of like for future stuff, it might be useful. So I'm going to make a new repo called just phase 2, and you can name it whatever you want, right? I'm just gonna keep it public because again, we're just trying to show a little bit like, oh, we've just been doing work and stuff. So I don't think there's ever really a reason to make it private unless there's something you really don't want to share. And I'm just gonna make it from scratch. I'll tell you what, I'll actually, yeah, let's add a git ignore. We haven't done that before. So I'm gonna add a git ignore here. So note that I can check these boxes and it'll actually create files in my first commit, or from my repo as a first commit. And so I'm actually going to add just a .git ignore here. So this is actually a really useful one because this will ignore certain files that aren't really relevant. So for example, when you run a notebook, there are things like checkpoints and caches and stuff like this that you kind of don't really need. It just makes life a little easier because then Git will just ignore this stuff. So you can see here, there's actually a template, and I can actually search for Python and click this guy. And that's usually going to be most of your projects. And what's going to do is ignore like kind of like this extra stuff that happens in Python projects. And I'll basically look for, Git will look for a file called .gitignore, and it'll just ignore any file that's listed underneath there. So we'll show you what that looks like, but this is optional. I'm going to create this repository now because I've seen this before. Yeah. So create this repository, and now I'll have, normally I would have an empty repository, but I actually have a first commit here. In fact, there's a .gitignore. So that's kind of like first step, right? I'll show you guys a little bit what gitignore is. Just like this, literally just a list of like all the different like file names and like directories and stuff that it should ignore. Basically, it's like if there's something called like PyCache, which happens when you like run a Py file, or if you sometimes run like there's IPMB checkpoints. I believe it's somewhere in here. There it is. You can see when you like run Jupyter Notebook. That's stuff that's not really relevant for anyone else. It's just kind of like for your own computer. So we're just like, oh, we don't need to bother like preserving this history. So that's what it's ignoring. Okay, does that make sense to people? Cool. For the record, you can edit this file and add more files into this if there's something we can do. And maybe we'll show that another time. But all right, cool. I made my phase 2 repo. It's empty other than the gitignore. And I'm just going to go clone this, right? So I'm going to open up, let's see here. Okay, I have a Jupyter Notebook already going. Good. I'm just going to open a terminal in here so you guys can see this. So let me go open up a terminal, and just want to make sure. Yeah, let's just open a new terminal. And I'm in this directory here, and I'm just going to clone it into this directory. So git clone, and I got my whole thing there. I run this, boom. And then if I look at it now, you'll see, where is it? Phase 2. right? So that's the repo I created. So I'm going to go into phase 2, right? And just to show you that it is in fact a GitHub repo, you see git status, it actually shows information. Does it give me an error? And if I do git log, you should see my first commit, which is actually that .git ignore. Note that if I do ls in this repo right now, I will not see anything because there's actually no files that are not hidden. But if I do ls-a, this will show the hidden files. And then you can see there's a .git ignore here. You also notice there's also a .git. And so this is actually the thing I wanted to point out is that when you make a repo, the way Git knows, like for example, you get git status, like how does it know it's a repo? It's looking for this .git folder in here. And this .git folder is basically a compressed version. We call it, it's like hashes and stuff of the commit history that you have. And that's why I can do like git log and it knows what the changes are. It's actually stored in this .git folder. I'll show you now. You shouldn't do this unless you know exactly what you're doing. But if I'm going to move the .git, I'm going to rename it to just _git like this. And if I do ls, you can see here, I can actually see it's not hit anymore. But now Git doesn't know this is a repo anymore. So if I do git status, you can say I get an error. So that's actually how Git recognizes that this is an actual repo that you should be tracking the history. So I'm going to move it back, or rename it back to .git. And now you see git status. You see now it does recognize it's a repo. And git log. Does that make sense to people? Thumbs up. Any questions? Okay, good. So that's going to be the key right here of like how we're going to have a nested repo. Because now what I want, like you can see, if I go back to the structure, you can see here that I want to add some like let's say I'm doing a new project, right? A little mini project. So what I might do, I'm just going to go to phase 1 here. I'm just going to pull up a random lab. Let's see here. And loading, and then I'm going to go to the repo. And normally at this point, I might like code it, clone it, like I've kind of showed you guys before, right? So you might make this into different ways. But what we're going to do instead, we're actually just going to clone this in this folder that is a repo, okay? And we're going to basically tell Git that's not a repo anymore. You're going to track instead all of phase 2, not the individual, what's it called? Not the individual project that, or not the individual repo that I'm cloning. Does that make sense? That's kind of clunky for me to say, but basically what I'm going to show, I'll show you guys maybe this a little bit. So let's just say that, okay, ls, and I might even make a new directory, say make directory topic, I don't know what topic this is, I'm going to say topic 3. Like you could have like something like this. I can cd into topic 3, right? There's nothing in there. And now I'm going to do git clone, and I'm going to clone this repo, which is the lab. Does that make sense so far? So I'm going to do this guy, git clone. And there you go. And now I can see the repo's in here. And you can go back to here if you're more familiar with this, topic 3, and there's the lab, and I can do some stuff in here, like all the files are in there. Okay. So the problem with this is that this is actually being recognized as a Git repo within a repo, which Git by default to make it as a submodule, or GitHub makes it as, I guess Git makes it a submodule, which we're not going to talk about submodules, but like there's a whole bunch of funkiness that goes in here. So what we're going to do is like, well, okay, I don't want that. I'm going to go ahead and cd into that repo I just cloned. And if I do ls-a, you see there's that .git. I'm going to go ahead and just rename .git. And so one way you can do this is you could, if you have, you can put in your settings to actually show hidden files. But what I find the most easiest, because it's terminal, I'm just going to do mv.git. So remember, I'm inside, what's it called? Inside the lab that I just cloned, right? I'm going to move this to just to called _git. And you can name it whatever you want. But the reason why I'm moving it instead of just deleting it is like what can sometimes happen if you're not careful, you might actually get rid of the main.git folder for your repo that you want to keep. So I'm just renaming it. So if I made a mistake, I can always rename it back to .git. Does that make sense to people? Okay, so now I'm renaming it. And now you can see if I do ls-a, you can see there's that git. And in fact, if I go back to here, you can see there's my git folder. So now what happens if I do git status, you'll see there'll be new untracked files. Oh, I'm going to go up just one level so you can see the list of it. The git status. And you can see here, oh wait, I'm still I'm still in there. That's why it's not listing the files. I think it's on my settings. but there's a bunch of these files. They're basically saying, oh, there's new stuff in here. So now I can do like git add dsc, and I'll say git commit like I normally would. I'll just say like some initial, what's this called? I'll call it data frames lab. Okay, so if I do this now, you see how it's adding all of these. This is just basically it's adding all of these files into like my repo. So now if I do git git push, because I already committed it, you'll see it'll show up in my repo that I made up here. Might take a second, depending how big the file is. There it is. And you can see there's topic 3, and then it goes to DSC data frames lab. And you can see I have the stuff. In fact, I even have the index right here. Oops, click on there. And then you can see it's loading for a second. I don't know if it'll load because sometimes Git does similar stuff, but that I can actually have this repo in here. And what's important, and I'm going to show you what happens if you didn't do this, is that I can now like do work on here and it will show up in here as just part of the phase 2 repo. Okay. Does this all make sense so far? Like going through? It might not be super clear like why I had to do this, but hopefully that makes sense and like what's going on. Any questions? Okay. So I'll repeat what I did again, but I'm going to show you what happens if I didn't do, like I didn't change that .git to _git. So I'm actually I'll copy a different lab just to make it understandable. So let me get a new lab. And say, okay, I'm going to do this lab. And this is what you might try doing the first time if you weren't aware that submodules exist. I'm going to go and clone this guy, which is called DSC more on missing lab. And let's see here. I'm on, so you can see here I'm on topic 3. I'm going to clone it into topic 3, git clone this guy here. And now if I do ls, here I'll clear my screen. ls, you can see there's the lab right there. And then it's like, okay, cool. If I do git status, you can see, oh, there's a missing lab. So let me do git add DSC more missing lab. Okay. And then it's like, oh, some warning. I'm going to ignore that because I don't know what's going on. So I'm just going to go and git status. Is it added in there? Oh, it's still there. Okay. Git commit -m initial, oops, initial DSC, or should I say missing lab. So this is the wrong way because what happened here in this warning is basically like, hey, you have a nested Git, you have an embedded Git repository. And so you can see it's telling me a whole bunch of things in yellow, which yellow means like, hey, you can do this, but like warning, right? So it's not an error, it's just kind of like warning you. So I was like, oh, okay. I did the commit and I do git push. And then let's pretend like, you did some stuff, you changed it. If you go back to your repo here and I refresh this, you can see I have topic 3. I still have the DSC data frame, so it looks good. And then you look right here like, wait a second. I can't click on it. Can I click on this guy? Yeah, I can click on the original one that we did. Why can't I click on this? And what's happening here is that this is being treated as a submodule. So this basically saying, oh, there's a repository somewhere else that refers to the actual code. So instead of storing the actual code, I'm just going to store the reference to this other repo. And that's why you can't just simply do a clone here. Does that make sense to people? Okay. And so the thing you have to do instead is you have to basically say, hey, there's a couple other ways you can do this. For example, it's telling you to get some submodule, but that's kind of a weird thing. There's something called subtree, which kind of works too. But I think the most straightforward way of doing this is just literally going into, into the folder, DSC more missing labs, and just literally saying, sorry, I'm just showing you guys where the file is. That .git folder, just renaming it to something else. And again, you could technically delete it, but I suggest renaming it in case you delete it and didn't mean to delete it. So this is a little bit safer. And now if I actually go back up and do git status, you should see, well, okay, there's an issue because I already added it as a submodule. So this is why like, people get it into this weird spot. There's nothing to commit, even though I changed some stuff. And that's because even though I changed stuff in this guy right here, Git is ignoring it because it thinks it's a submodule because I already did that initial part. Okay. Does that make sense to people? Thumbs up if that makes sense. Thumbs down like I'm completely lost. Sideways, like maybe do it one more time. Okay. Who would like to see it one more time for kind of like the process of what that looks like? Just raise your hand. I don't know. Would you guys like to see it one more time? Okay, Sam raised hands. So that's all I need. You just need one person to say it. All right, so let me just do a new project, right? So our new like mini lab or something. Let's just do this mini project for data cleaning. So I'm just getting the repo here. And so this is what you actually want to do. So I have my repo already made called phase 2, and I want to add this guy into my phase 2 repo. So I'm going to go copy this, right? Go back to, I'm going back into my repo, right? So PWD, you can see phase 2, topic 3, and keep topic 3. And I'm just going to do git clone, and then the URL that I copied, and I'll copy in there. So good. So far, pretty simple. And then I'm just going to go cd into, it was dsc-data cleaning, right? So now if I do ls-a, you should see it's .git. So all I got to do is move mv, which is basically just rename it to _git, like this. And now if I do, I'm gonna go up one level just to make it easy. But you could do git add dot, for example, that would work fine. Git add, and then it was dsc data cleaning. You can see git status, showing you guys all the files that are in that folder. Git commit, sorry, I always do that for you guys. -m, and then I'll do, initial data cleaning lab or mini project. And then I'll do a git push. And then you can see here, if I go back here, you should see there's a new folder. Oh, it's still pushing probably. You refresh. There we go. And you can see here, data cleaning lab, and I can edit this stuff now. And I can now edit like the files and stuff like this. For example, if I went into the missing lab, open up the index, right? And like made some changes. For example, I'm just going to delete this just to make a change and save it. And now if I do git status, you should see that there's a change. Oops, did I not change it? Am I in the right one? Missing. Oh, wait, this is the wrong. This is the submodule lab that I did a bad thing, right? So I want to do the data cleaning project. And now I can edit this one. And I'm just going to delete this. I'm sorry, that's the old folder. I'm going to just take that original guy. I'm just going to change something. No, let me just split this out. It's a really minor change, but it'll show now. If I do git status, you see like, oh, there is a change. And I can do git add, that guy. Git commit, -m, change, git push. And you should see it's just like normal, like you would have any other commit. So now if I go back to phase 2, you see there's a new change called change. And you can see here the index.pnb was changed 14 seconds ago. Okay. So that's why I'm showing this to you guys. So if it helps, maybe I can put like a little directions of what this would look like. Sumana, I saw you unmute. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So in this structure right here, the phase 2 folder is the first repo, right? And then if you go back, and then the topic 3, is that a repo or is that just a folder?
Just a folder. So it's just a folder within my repo.
And then inside the topic 3, we have a repo. Repos.
So yeah, it technically is no longer a repo because now I got rid of the .git, but it's
yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure that's clear. Yeah, and then now you can see this is the same stuff from the repo, so you can see a little bit. So this is the way I would suggest doing stuff for future like mini projects and labs and stuff as you're going through, because then you don't have a bunch of repos all over the place where it's like, oh, this is my phase 2 stuff, and you can name it something else. You could like, I don't know, like labs for February or something like that. I don't know. Or you could make a whole, or if you wanted to, you could make a Flatiron labs repo and then have even phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and have different stuff. So you can structure however you want, but this is the way to kind of like group these repos all together. Okay. Yeah. So sound pretty good. So I did this before for when we did other Git stuff, so it kind of helps to put little steps. So the steps are basically, the first thing is like make a repo for all the labs, right, for a phase. Okay, so I can make a repo, right? And then I'm going to do find the repo for find the repo I want to work on. So it's kind of like the lab, right? So like lab repo or a mini project repo. And then I'm going to do clone this repo into my main repo. Okay. And so what I would do here, do git clone, I'll just put like repo URL. Okay. And then I'm going to say, okay, rename the .git folder in lab repo. So that'd be something like I'd cd into repo lab. And then get, mv, and this would be like mv.git _ git. Okay. And then I can do,
recording in progress.
Commit. Okay. So it'd be like git commit, or sorry, git add dot, and then git commit -m message, and then hopefully this is feeling kind of redundant now. Git push, like you guys get the feel for how this works. So this is like basically the steps you would do, like you would do this like for the first time, and then these are the steps you would do for each lab. Okay, makes sense. Cool. All right, I can share this out too. I'll just call this what repos within repos. Okay, so it's not too hard. The main thing is just you have to remember just to change that .git folder. Just make sure you don't change, like for example, this gets to my phase 2. Don't change phase 2's, like the main repo. Don't change that .git folder, which is at the highest level, because otherwise it won't know that's a repo anymore. Okay, makes sense. Cool. All right. Yeah, so that's kind of like, that's what I wanted to make sure to show you guys. It's not directly with the project, but I want to show you guys now, and that's why I also recorded it now, so that way I can say, hey, remember we talked about this last week? How you guys are doing, like you guys have been focused on the project. Like this is what you should think about doing for phase 2. Okay. Cool. Any questions at all? No? Very good. All right. To make life easy, I'm going to stop the recording here, and we'll continue on.